Hello, I'm Tiffany Cloud. Welcome to The Storm, and thank you for watching today on WYLN TV 35. I've said it before, I'll say it again. One of the most thankless local offices a person can run for, school board. After all, it's so very difficult to please all the parents all the time, so I truly applaud those who step up and decide to run. School board does have great influence over our local fiscal situation and, importantly, the education and safety of our most precious resource, our children. Today I'm pleased to be joined by a candidate throwing her hat into the ring for Hazleton Area School Board. She's running as an independent, and you'll learn all about her and her candidacy right after the break. Welcome back to The Storm. I'm so pleased to be joined today by HERSEIM. She is a candidate for Hazleton Area School Board, and she is running as an independent. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me today.
Well, and coming back to the show,
Yes.
You were on here before in a prior capacity. We were talking about education, but I'm fascinated to hear that since that time you've decided to throw your hat into the ring as an independent for school board.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so we'll get to that in a second. Before we do, why don't you tell the audience, for those who didn't catch the first time you were on the show, tell them a little about your background. Where you're from, you know, how your passion for education came about, those sorts of things.
Sure. I was raised in New Jersey and spent some time in Montana, and we moved to Pennsylvania as part of my husband's job opportunity. And when we moved here, I had a very young daughter who was about 1 year old, and I started working at a local child care center, and I found my passion for early childhood education. I spent my time since I've been here at Bloomsburg University getting my master's in early childhood education, and it's just taken off from there. I enjoy going to those school board meetings, and I love teaching the little ones, so it was only natural.
And you're actually now a partner in a place called Bright Beginnings Early Learning Academy, if you could tell the audience a bit about that place.
Absolutely. It used to be Kitty College. It's right on Main Street in Cunningham, and what we do is we're a private academic preschool and kindergarten, and we have a very unique approach to early childhood education. We do hands-on, active, engaging learning centers, and it's really a whole child attention that we promote there, and family engagement is absolutely a top priority. We have our parents coming in for different events. Dr. Seuss Week, we had parent readers, and we let the kids kind of pick where we're going on field trips and let them kind of run the direction of their schooling. So
you have a master's in education, you live and breathe education every single day. You're a mom as well.
Yes.
What made you decide, besides your passion obviously, what was it really though that prompted you to take that next step and say, okay, I'm throwing my hat in the ring, I'm running for school board?
Well, I think I have a voice, and so do you, and so do all the parents and community members in our area, and I want to have that voice count in the form of a vote for our school board for our kids. We have so many tough problems in this area, and I think it's time to get creative and find those solutions and roll up our sleeves and do that hard work. And I believe that being on the school board is something that's a responsibility. I've taken a lot of time to learn about the system, attending board meetings for years now, and I think it's time that I find a way to share those thoughts and those votes.
And you do, I will say, you walk the walk. You do go to all those meetings. You are a very involved, engaged parent. You spend a lot of time and a lot of efforts with what's called the PAC, which I think I have this right. It's the Parent Advocacy Committee?
Yes, it is.
And it's really just about getting parents more involved in their kids' education, correct?
Absolutely. Our main focus is to promote communication so that parents feel like that they can be part of that dialogue. We've done different events in the past with security and Common Core last November, and this coming April we have another event focused on dyslexia and just promoting awareness and again, talking about solutions with professionals and how parents and teachers can look at better ways to differentiate instruction and serve another portion of our population.
Well, and I'm glad that there are people like yourself out there that are, reminding all of us parents too, especially when you have dual income households, everybody's busy working. It's very difficult as a working mom, just for example, you're trying to keep your head above water. It's easy for parents to become disengaged and say, listen, I'm going to let the teachers do their thing. I don't have the time. Parents have to be engaged in their children's education and what is going on.
Right, and we need to find different avenues because like you said, everybody is so busy in this day and age. So whether it's at your PTA meetings at the schools or PTA council or PAC or just volunteering in your schools or just taking the extra time to read to your kids every day, there's all these different ways that you can become a part of those possible solutions.
One of the things that you said to me as we opened this was you talked about the fact that this district is faced with a lot of issues. And maybe it depends which parent you're talking to, which issue matters to them, but what would you outline are some of the top issues that you think we're facing that we really need to tackle differently, better?
Absolutely. I think that, one of our concerns as parents is always going to be security. Those are our babies, and we send them for 7 hours a day to the schools, and we want to make sure they're safe. So I think we need to take a long look at the security and look at the consistency throughout the district. We have vastly different entrances to our buildings, and I mean, as far as the architecture, of course, but the people who are at those metal detectors, what kind of training obligations do they have? What are they being helped with? What kind of support do they need? And how do we do a better job looking at the whole picture across the board and letting each school learn from one another too?
In addition to security, what would be some of the others?
I think that, again, going back to communication, finding different ways to build bridges between the community, the families, the school boards, the principals, the teachers, anything that we can do to help promote that sense of this is a common goal. This is education, and it is at the core of our community. So we need to look at how we can get everybody from small business owners involved and the STEM school, and how do we just build bridges all over the place and find that respectful dialogue.
Yes, I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you said the word respectful dialogue, and I'm glad you're talking about communications because, and I'm speaking right now not as just television host, I'm speaking as parent as well. I have noticed myself that there have been situations, whether it was, which I was vocal on, and I'm sorry to bring it back up, folks, but for example, when there was the norovirus breakout at Valley Elementary about a year or so ago, and it was known, some say that Friday, many say that Saturday, but we parents did not get any official notification written until that Tuesday. And that Monday in school, there were lines and lines of kids, vomiting in hallways. It got out of hand. Absolutely. There were some members of school board who chose to go online and minimize. Others went on and said other things. There wasn't consistency in terms of communication. And that's where I think that so many parents, it wasn't that we were afraid our kids were getting bubonic plague. It wasn't that. It was the lack of consistent and, importantly, fast communication to the parents.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of work to be done in that capacity, but I think I've seen progress as we look at what's been done over the past year, especially hiring a community liaison. Those sorts of pieces that we start to put in place will hopefully facilitate that better, faster communication, because what happened last year with the norovirus was unacceptable. That's just not serving anybody at this point. So we need to reinforce what we've done well and look at other possible solutions, other avenues.
And just the combination, we only have a few seconds left in this segment, but the combination of what happened recently over in Drums with the security situation and just, there were a lot of questions again on the heels of that, and I think it's communication's imperative. So if you get elected and you can find a way to make it faster and more thorough, so we parents feel better, that'd be wonderful. With that, we're going to take a break. We will be right back on The Storm. Welcome back to The Storm. I'm talking to Casey HERSEIM. She's an independent candidate for Hazleton Area School Board. You are running as an independent, and I want to give you the opportunity to tell the audience why as an independent? Are you truly an independent?
I am. When I moved here 8 years ago, I registered as an independent. There are so many different things about the Republican Party and the Democratic Party that are great and that have their drawbacks. I really find myself voting on individual issues and for individual candidates more than along any particular party line. So,
so you are a true
I'm an
independent.
Yeah.
Not one of those people who just says, I'm going to do
it's-
that to avoid the primary. You really are an independent, many years.
Absolutely am an independent. So
Yeah. Well, I did check out your Facebook page before this interview,
Sure.
and in fact, I did see there was a whole section about your political views, about you being an independent and why you're an independent, and it mirrored what you just said.
Absolutely.
So, one of the things that we talked about briefly was the fact that you had an event towards the end of 2004 through the PAC, the Parent Advocacy Committee, as related to Common Core. I want to have you share your position on Common Core, but before you do that, believe it or not, there are still people out there who don't really know what Common Core is. So if you could give your synopsis as to what it is, and then we'll talk about where you stand on it.
Sure. Well, it's actually, for us, it's PA Core, which is a little bit different from the national core set of standards, but it was adopted by Pennsylvania actually about 3 years ago. So we've had some time for some educators to take their own initiative to do the research and figure out what it really means and how these standards really should look in each classroom. But for our district, we realized this year that we have to implement it completely in our schools. So in November of 2014, we had an event that was basically to educate the public about what Common Core, or PA Core rather, is. We had administrators and teachers and different kind of perspectives, but when you look at core standards, PA Core or Common Core, any way you look at it, you're looking at the goal. The goal in mind is to increase our expectations for our kids. And we've got amazing, smart kids, and these standards are understandable in a way that we can get kids doing more in a hands-on active way in the schools. Now, there's a big difference between what the goal is and the way it was implemented. I think that we've had a lot of struggles making this transition, and for a number of different reasons. You know, are we really giving our teachers the support they need, and are they really on board? Because another major piece of Common Core is the standardized tests. And, you know, one test is not a great picture of what a student's performance can be, especially when you consider the impact on the ESL population, kids who are asked to take the test that don't know English. But there's no room for, getting out of the test. Everybody takes the test.
Well, and a lot of parents get concerned that the teachers are having to teach to the test.
Absolutely.
You hear that phrase all the time, that they're no longer getting to teach and do things that, when I was young, I had a teacher who read us the entire Little House on the Prairie series and the entire Anne of Green Gables series. Mrs. Whitebread, my elementary school teacher, the greatest teacher I ever had, may she rest in peace.
And those are the pieces you hang on to for a lifetime. That's what inspires the love of learning, not
and
this
the teachers
workbook and PSSA
prep. And they can't do
prep.
that now.
Right.
They don't have the time.
Well, I found
ability.
that some teachers are using parents in the community to come in and read on a weekly basis, whether it's Magic School Bus or some other series. And there are different ways to still create an atmosphere where we can do that, where we can still speak to who these children are and how they enjoy learning. But more often than not, you hear horror stories about study island questions and things like that we need to shift our priority. Yes, we want to be able to show that our school has bright, young, amazing minds, and we want to do well on a standardized test. We want these goals in curriculum, and we want to be able to show performance as compared to a national average. But how are we really looking at this? How can we make it better for the kids and for the teachers? And how, as a school board, communicate our goals better and get better insight and information from the parents? It comes back to communication, and it comes back to looking at the whole child.
Well, let me ask you, and before I get into your position on Common Core, one of the things you see is related to, I know you're talking about PA Core, but Common Core.
Right.
You see posts on Facebook all the time. They'll put on a math problem, and they'll show how I did division back in the 1800s when I learned how to do division. And then they'll show how these kids today, I've seen it with my own kid, how they're learning division. And it's like you have to have a degree from MIT to understand the new system.
Right.
It's very difficult to understand the new system.
Well, and they call that like promoting higher order thinking. You want to be able to.
So I was a lower order thinker? Is that?
Not at all. Not at all.
I'm joking, but
but it's very different from memorizing
Yeah.
your multiplication tables. And I think that there's absolutely still a place in classrooms to memorize those multiplication tables because it's something you need to know as an adult right off the top of your head. You can't go into base tens and different formulas and that sort of thing, but it comes back to the implementation. As this stuff is presented in kindergarten and first and second grade, it becomes part of second nature to these kids to think on those higher order levels. When we try and throw that at a fourth grader or a sixth grader or a ninth grader, there's something lost in translation. And that's where the biggest problem is. For us to look at it, it takes a lot of work to try and understand those math problems, and they still don't really make sense because that's not how we were taught.
Well, yeah, and it's interesting. You're the first person who's explained it to me as it's a higher order level of thinking, because you're right. We did memorize. We were all about memorization. And when my daughter, for example, is showing me this basic division problem, it seems pretty darn deep how she's getting to the solution. And my brain, which I like to think is relatively evolved, really struggles to get there.
And it helps for some kids because some kids are able to think in a more abstract level, and this becomes a new learning tool for them to think at this level. But some kids, it's much easier to do the memorization. It's much easier to remember the formula and be able to do it as part of a routine. So while the way that we're teaching now according to these core standards might be very helpful for a part of our population in education, it might be actually hindering and hurting some of the other kids that learn in different ways.
Well, one of the areas that it certainly hurts is the parents' ability to probably help with certain areas of homework.
Definitely.
Because the system is so different than what is normal to
Tears
to
of
us.
frustration all across the area. And that's not just Hazleton, that's not just Pennsylvania, that's a national issue, is that we're not doing a good enough job educating our parents as we educate our kids.
It's interesting you say that. So would you then say that you are a supporter of Common Core, or you're a supporter of the goals of Common Core, but maybe not the implementation of it?
I think that the goal, what you have in mind, is a noble pursuit. We always want to try and find ways to raise our expectations for our kids and do better. But I think that with the implementation, we've lost a lot of key points. And I think that as a whole, we can do better looking at the whole child as opposed to this focus on the testing.
Well, I appreciate this conversation. It's the longest one I've ever had on Common Core. No, I appreciate it. I got a bit of an education myself. We're going to take a break there. We will be right back on The Storm. Welcome back to The Storm. I'm here with Casey HERSEIM, independent candidate for Hazleton Area School Board. One of the things that I know may not be the most exciting part of the job for you, maybe it is, I don't know, but I mean, there's a lot of fiscal responsibility with running for Hazleton Area School Board. Certainly, people in this area feel like they are stretched to the max in terms of taxes. Everybody wants property tax relief, etc. What do you think you'll be able to bring to the table, and what are your thoughts in that regard?
Well, I'm a mom, so I have a vested interest in what we're doing in our schools, but I'm a taxpayer and I'm a small business owner, and I understand that right now the budget is tight. But there are two things that I feel strongly about. One is that Hazleton Area School Board members and community members need to be better advocates at the state level, because we have the ability to get creative in our own budget, but this is a bigger issue. This is not just our district who is struggling with the financial hardships of trying to run an educational system in this time, and we need to do more to have a conversation with our state representatives and really be part of that dialogue and advocate for our district and for our kids in our system. And then the other part of that is going back to getting creative. We have to take a long look at that budget, and I understand that we've got the board right now has some really hard choices to make with what they've just passed as a preliminary measure and trying to increase taxes. I don't think that anybody in this area supports that. Do we want our kids to suffer? Do we want programs to be cut? No. But what can we do to try and reconfigure our responsibilities. And this is new to me, so I am eager to hear what other people have to say. I really do want that feedback, and we'll talk about the Facebook pages and things like that, but I want input from the community. What ideas do you have? Because we need to get creative here.
Okay. One of the things you were saying to me when we were at break was you were talking about the Times Leader and how you went back to some newspapers from the mid-90s up until nearly the year 2000. Why don't you tell the audience what you were telling me?
This is not new politics in Hazleton area. And as a newcomer to this area, I kind of wanted to go back and look at the past 20 years. And what I found was there are a lot of the same stories. It's, parents that had backgrounds in PTA wanting to get involved in running for the school board to reinforce dialogue and create a more transparent system, and a lot of the same names. In fact, one gentleman from the Valley, Mr. Busher, who is in Kiwanis, and his quote from a Times Leader article was, about supporting the PTA, and I see him doing the same thing as an advocate and a cheerleader now. So, it's some of the issues.
The more things change, the more they stay the same.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, one of my big issues has been, and my mother was an advocate a long time for it, our classroom sizes are way too big. It's gotten out of control, and there are students who in smaller classroom sizes wouldn't slip through the cracks,
right,
who are slipping through the cracks, and it's most unfortunate because we have these mammoth class sizes, not in all cases, but in some cases. I want to give you an opportunity as we close to let people know where they can go to learn more about you.
Sure. It's Casey HERSEIM for HASD School Board on Facebook, and my email address, anybody can email me anytime, and that's cdherseim, HERSEIM, @yahoo.com.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Casey. I wish you best of luck as an independent in the upcoming election for school board in the fall. And remember, folks, when you look around and you don't like what you see, you don't just have to complain about it. You could do what Casey did. You could decide to run for office. You can do something about it. Thank you so much for watching.